A series of severe storms is about to begin, and this comes as a broad warm sector will pair up with the jet stream to support those storms through the weekend. Daily rounds of wind, hail, and a few tornadoes can be expected into at least the Sunday timeframe. This video has the latest full forecast right ahead. I want to start this video by overviewing the day-by-day zones that are going to have to watch precipitation and severe weather. From there, we'll talk more about the day-by-day risks as well as the ingredients that will possibly impact your area. Let's start here, though, as we push this future radar out of our Wednesday evening and into our Thursday, April 17th of 2025, where our first day of possible strong storms will get going. Here's the setup. Low pressure is likely going to be moving up into places like Minnesota and Wisconsin as we go throughout the day. As it lifts to the north and east out of parts of the central plains, we will likely see it carrying a warm front with it that could lead to at least generalized storms from the Midwest up into parts of the upper Midwest. Behind that warm front, we will see just enough of an environment that with a cold front moving in from the west, we could get a few severe storms to develop through the evening out of parts of Minnesota, extending back down through at least Nebraska, Iowa, and possibly into Kansas and Missouri. Again, I'll be talking about that more in just a minute, along with the other days that we'll have to watch. Speaking of stuff to watch, Thursday evening, we'll be watching pretty heavy snow moving through parts of the Rockies. That will also be something I'll talk about in a minute with the forecasted snow totals for a place like Wyoming and eventually the southwestern U.S. that will get impacted out of Thursday and then into Friday and Friday night. While that snow will be shifting south through parts of the Mountain West in the day Friday, we'll also be watching the cold front from Thursday and Thursday night that will be over the plains at those times, begin to move east and closer to the Mississippi Valley, and that's exactly where we're going to see a better chance for severe weather in a pretty broad but elongated zone as we go through the day and into the night. You can see from Friday into Friday evening and even Friday night, a pretty broad zone expecting precipitation, and a lot of this will have the potential to be in the form of severe storms with especially at least a wind and hail threat, maybe even the risk for tornadoes. Again, I'll talk about all this in more detail in a minute. This will stretch all the way from Texas up to Michigan and points in between, and it won't end there. We'll likely see this front continue to move east, but it will begin to slow down. Not only will that increase the flood threat, but it will also make the severe weather threats a little bit more iffy over zones that see precipitation as we go into the weekend. Around Saturday into Saturday night, there is no doubt that from the northeastern U.S. all the way back over into parts of the southern plains along this front and in points in between, we'll likely be watching the threat for some rain and storms. But as we see storms training over the same zones, that could limit instability for these storms that get going later into the day to actually tap into daytime heating. That's going to be something to watch, but at least isolated severe weather can be anticipated probably from the Ohio Valley back down to the southern plains around Saturday and Saturday night. And then as we go into Sunday, we could see more renewed severe weather closer to the Mississippi Valley as new low pressure tries to sprout up. This will be stuff that I'll be breaking down in more detail here in just a few minutes, but let's start with Thursday and Thursday night's threat. Here's a look at my custom severe weather forecasting scale for our April 17th, our Thursday and Thursday night time frame. We are as high as a level 3 of 7 for this threat that will include parts of Nebraska, northern Kansas and Missouri, western Illinois and Wisconsin, and then into some parts of Minnesota and Iowa, where the highest threat will be there in that yellow shaded zone. All of these spots could watch out for at least isolated damaging winds, but by far the biggest risk we will see out of any storms that fire up through the day and into the night will be large to very large hail, where in fact we could even see some 2 to 3 inch diameter hail out of a couple storms there out of eastern Nebraska into western Iowa and southwest Minnesota. I want to go ahead and jump into timing of all these storms because we'll also have at least a lower end tornado threat. Here we go with the future radar from the High Resolution Rapid Refresh Model, or HRRR model, starting in the morning and then pushing into the early to mid-afternoon of our Thursday, looking like smooth sailing overall in terms of storm coverage, but it's once we get through the mid to late afternoon and then into the evening and dusk time hours where we're likely going to have the best chance for storms to initiate, particularly along the cold front and dry line. A triple point setup really coming together here from southern Minnesota back down to eastern Nebraska and in some parts of northwest Iowa and points in between in particular. This is where the warm front will have just moved through. We're going to see very dry dew point just to the west of here, banking up against a zone with very high moisture, and that's what helps create updrafts and thunderstorms, and this is where we'll likely see 1 to 3 inch hail in widely scattered bouts of these storms. Certainly something to watch. We could even see some hail extending back into central Nebraska and western Nebraska if any storms get going there. That's currently unknown if that's going to happen, but you can see this model indicates it does not, and it doesn't really indicate much storm activity into northern Kansas, northern Missouri, or northern Illinois either. Certainly something we'll have to keep an eye on. I'll keep you posted if we do see a higher risk in any of those zones by the time we get around to this event, but right now it looks like a lot of the activity out of eastern Nebraska and Iowa and Minnesota that will have its strongest peak around the sundown time frame. It will already begin falling apart by the middle of the night, as we'll just see rain and rumbles of thunder moving towards parts of Wisconsin, maybe some isolated larger hailstones. With that being said, let's go ahead and move into the overview for the next day of possible severe weather I want to talk about. That is for our Friday and Friday night, where, as you've probably seen if you've been watching my previous videos, or if you've seen the future radar overview that I talked about here at the start of this one, we're likely going to see an elongated zone for severe weather, as we see a strong piece of jet stream energy called a trough moving out of the southwestern U.S. and sending energy into the mid-levels of the atmosphere, 15 to 20,000 feet up, all the way to the Midwest. Around and east of that strongest energy is where the severe weather setup will be, so that takes you from the lower Great Lakes all the way back to Texas for Friday and Friday night. In that same zone, along and ahead of the cold front, we will likely see a broad but narrow warm sector that continues to look likely. It will be the focal point for the strongest storms, and really anywhere from northern Texas and Oklahoma up to southwestern Michigan, we're going to have ample energy in place for the storms. So as we go deeper through the day and into the afternoon and evening, with at least a little bit of wind shear in some of these zones, we could see some level of a tornado threat, but particularly a wind and hail threat, as it really looks like winds are going to be around the same direction as you go up into the atmosphere, really just powering storms, not necessarily rotating storms in a widespread fashion. As a result of the ingredients I just talked about, here's a look at what my ONW severe scale looks like for our Friday and Friday night. A broad and elongated level 3 of 7 zone right along that cold front and out ahead of it from Texas and the Red River Valley there out of Texas into Oklahoma, all the way up to Michigan and in points in between. A lot of these zones have been impacted by recent severe weather events, and this one will be no exception in including you with scattered damaging winds, scattered large hail, and at least a few tornadoes being possible here or there. From Friday night into Saturday, that's when we start to see the severe weather setup become a little bit more iffy, but the leading edge of broad but potent jet stream energy will likely continue to support the late weekend severe weather risk somewhere from the Ohio Valley back down to Texas and in points in between. As I mentioned earlier, storms will likely be training over a lot of the same zones, and as we see multiple clusters, that will decrease the chance in more discrete activity, decrease the chance in severe activity overall. Certainly a zone we'll have to watch, though, as we are in a strong atmospheric setup still, even if the surface setup won't be as favorable for severe weather. Here's a closer look at what the instability may look like as we go to the peak heating of our Saturday afternoon. This graphic really indicating blues and greens. That is lower to maybe modest end instability. Any storms that do tap into that, though, could become severe, and that's why we still have to watch at least isolated threats, maybe even more scattered in threats that could be realized from the Ohio Valley back down to Texas, so be aware. From there, we get into our Sunday, where it looks like a stronger trough, and a new one at that, should support another round of severe weather by the time we get into that Sunday and Sunday night time frame, as it ejects out of the southwest U.S. and gets closer to the Mississippi Valley. In those red shaded zones that I've highlighted there from Texas getting into the Mississippi Valley, we could certainly see a severe weather threat get going. The exact details on moisture and other ingredients like lift and instability that could come up into this storm are a little bit more unknown, but it certainly looks like you need to be prepared for another day of severe weather in many of the same zones recently impacted for Sunday and Sunday night. With that being said, if severe weather is all you wanted to hear about, and you're done with this video, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button right down below. But I do want to cap this off by talking a little bit about the western snow and just general high winds that will also accompany the active weather through the next few days. Let's talk about the snow totals first using this blended guidance on screen. Most of our snow is going to fall from parts of the Mountain West and into the far west central high plains by the time we go from our Wednesday evening when I'm recording this, and then through our Saturday evening, where especially these zones through Montana, Wyoming, down through western Colorado and into far northern New Mexico will have the best chance of higher elevations, particularly in the central parts of those states, getting 6 to 12 plus inches of snow, some of the highest peaks getting closer to 12 to 24 plus inches. This is definitely a very notable late season event for these zones, certainly something to keep an eye on if you live in those affected communities. Some of that snow will be accompanied by high winds. You can see using this blended guidance that as we go through our Thursday afternoon and into the evening, we will be watching gusty winds, especially into some parts of the Rockies down into the southwest U.S. And any of these winds we see coming out of Arizona and New Mexico and out into the plains from the southwest to the northeast, gusting in the greens upwards of 30 to 40 miles per hour, and then into the orangish and red shades 50 to 60, we are going to be looking at the threat for fire danger wherever we do not see that precipitation. That's going to be a big concern not only on Thursday, but also as we go into the weekend, as a lot of the same zones out of the plains over to the Mississippi Valley will be continuing to see gusty winds from the southwest to the northeast. And when you don't pair that with thunderstorms, you're in for a recipe of fire danger if anything can get ignited.